Once again, we will take a look at one of the recently published novels by Neal Stephenson. In this case, his 883-page novel Fall, or Dodge in Hell, published in the year 2019. Just to quickly interject, from now on, I will refer to the novel just as Fall, since the rest of the title is just too much of a mouthful. Fall is actually the sequel to Neal Stephenson's 2011 tome, Reamde, which I have not covered in my reviews yet, as Reamde seems to be the result of Neal Stephenson wanting to write a contemporary action-packed thriller rather than anything science fiction, alternate history, cyberpunk, or fantasy related. This does not detract from Reamde, it just would not fit into the categories of my reviews. As a sequel to Reamde, it is therefore unsurprising that Fall is on the hard side of the sci-fi Mohs scale, although it also shares many traits of a fantasy novel. Do not despair. I will untangle and explain how this is possible later in the video, so please do not start to tear your hairs out yet. The scope of the world in Fall is quite expansive, and there are some interesting ideas presented in the novel that invite the reader to ponder some fundamental questions related to consciousness and what it means to be alive. The story's roster of characters is also quite large, if we compare it to the more recent novels of Neal Stephenson, that is. A substantial part of these characters have been already present in Reamde, thus circumventing the need to introduce them from scratch in Fall. In terms of awards, Fall was only nominated for the Goodreads Choice Award for Science Fiction in 2019. In this category, Fall thus shares a similar fate as The Rise and Fall of Dodo. Unlike The Rise and Fall of Dodo, the novel Fall only received a combined score of 3.6 out of 5 stars based on 10,000 of reviews on Goodreads, LibraryThing and Amazon. These are numbers that should be worrying and tend to hint at some underlying problems related to the novel in question. And believe me, we will discuss them at length later. Also, just as a point of reference, Kim Stanley Robinson's book 2312 also only achieved 3.6 out of 5 stars, using the methodology that I have applied in my recent reviews. The story of Fall kicks off when founder of gaming company Corporation 9592, Richard Dodge Forthrust, one of the protagonists of Reamde, dies during a routine medical procedure. Soon after, his grieving family and friends uncover in his will that he wished his body to be given to a cryonics company. Dodge's family has his brain destructively scanned and its data structures uploaded and stored in the cloud until it can eventually be revived. In the following years, technology advances enough so that Dodge's brain can be turned back on. This breakthrough encourages increased research and funding, especially from well-off, aging entrepreneurs. Eventually, more and more brains are scanned, and this digital afterlife, the bit world, is populated with an ever-increasing number of souls. However, the bit world has its own rules and is not a utopia, as people might have thought in the beginning. As usual, we will begin to discuss the novel's strong points, and the overall premise is certainly quite original, as you can usually expect from the works of Neal Stephenson. Fall starts strong. What are the legal ramifications of someone's brain being simulated on a cluster of computers? Would turning off the simulation constitute murder? How could a scanned brain function digitally, specifically if there are no inputs of a biological body? How would society change if there is a digital afterlife awaiting? These are all intriguing questions, and Fall delivers mostly satisfying and competent answers to them. In addition to this central plot, there is also a side story that focuses on the role of social media, echo chambers, and the subjective interpretation of reality. All of these are relevant themes today. However, things start to fall apart a bit during the conclusion of this side plot around the middle of the book, as it just linearly extrapolates contemporary perceptions in a fashion that comes off as just lazy, with enlightened tech-savvy city dwellers versus gullible, superstitious rural folk that verge on the brutish. Granted, this description might be a bit exaggerated, but the emphasis here is on a bit. In general, the structure of the novel consists of the events in the real world, meat space, and the events in the virtual world, or rather bit world. More and more parts of the story take place in bit world as we progress in time, and Fall therefore transforms from near future hard science fiction into a fantasy mythology, since bit world shares the themes of a medieval mythological virtual world, which is likely caused by Dodge's prior involvement in the creation of the successful MMORPG T-Rain. This brings me to another central point of criticism of the novel. The genesis of bit world, while in general interesting, can feel quite meandering and drawn out. There are some events within bit world that pick up the pace, but they are followed by significant time jumps that hurt the overall cohesion of the story and drag the pace down again to a proverbial crawl. Also, in the latter parts of the novel, most characters have migrated to bit world. However, this transformation incurs a form of amnesia related to the previous life experiences, which is not resolved within Fall. As a result, the meat space and bit worlds part of Fall feel quite disconnected. Furthermore, it does not help that the mythological events in bit world heavily rely on biblical themes and to a lesser extent on the Greco-Roman pantheon and its legends. Don't get me wrong, this is not a bad thing per se, but at times Fall feels like a carbon copy of them. There are also some missed opportunities. Fall does address how society might change if a digital afterlife becomes available. However, there are many more concepts, themes, and conflicts that have remained unexplored. How do the major religions cope? Will there be social unrest because not everyone will be able to get immediate access to the initially expensive brain scans? Why are there no competing versions of Bitworld? Maybe people want to live in a science fiction utopia and not in an eternal version of Age of Mythology. Or maybe there are some nations, ideological or religious groups that want to realize their own version of a digital utopia, unencumbered by what was preordained by a middle-aged man living in the Pacific Northwest. So much potential that has not been used. Nevertheless, there are some nuggets for the most ardent fans of Neal Stephenson though. However, to properly address them, we have to cross into spoiler territory here. So beware. As it turns out, Fall reveals that it, and by extension Reamde, are both part of the wider Baroque Cycle universe, which consists of Quicksilver, the Confusion, the System of the World, and also Cryptonomicon. This is done through the inclusion of characters from the aforementioned books in the story of Fall, namely Randy Waterhouse, Amy Shafto, and Enoch Root, albeit only as souls having migrated to Bitworld. Nonetheless, it adds a bit of a guessing game related to who is the original character of the different amnesiac souls within Bitworld. However, these neat little Easter eggs do not compensate the inherent flaws of Fall. Overall, Fall is another blend of fantasy and hard science fiction mixed together by Neal Stephenson. But this time the whole is not bigger than its parts. The beginning of Fall is promising and there are some interesting questions to ponder. The characters, while not exceptional, are sufficient enough to propel the story. But Fall starts to fall apart due to its inconsistent pacing as a larger fraction of the story takes place in Bitworld, which itself is described in great detail, but also feels aseptic at the same time. Too much space and time is given to a not very compelling recounting of biblical and mythological tropes, while some potentially crucial aspects in meat space are left under or even unexplored. To top it off, Fall is concluded in the typical Neal Stephenson fashion by an abrupt ending that leaves the overarching conflict, if not unresolved, at least open-ended. If you liked this video, you may also enjoy the other reviews and content on my channel. Feel free to leave a comment if you want to discuss the novels or if you want to suggest other books that I should review in the future. Please consider upvoting and subscribing, it is much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and until next time.